All right, Lotters, Star Kiper Jr. back for Week 13 in the lot. Hard to believe, but another regular season is winding to a close. Before we get any further into this segment of Star Kiper, I'd like to bring in our sponsor, Mrs. Smith's Flaky Crust made with real butter pumpkin pie. Perfect for your Thanksgiving dessert. Remember, if you don't have the time or talent to make your own pumpkin pie, just give Mrs. Smith a call. All right? Delicious. All right. So last week I went 3-2, brings us to 33-27 on the year, which guarantees me a regular season over 500. Even if I stink up the joint and go 0-5 this week, seems like the quarter was a pretty good tool last week in deciding some of those really close games. But this week I think I've got some clear-cut favorites, and I'm going to run through all the matchups for you right now. So without further ado, starting with Stinker at Star. This game has very little significance. Stinker's pretty much a lock to win that division over there, and Star is pretty much locked into what he's got, either the third or fourth seed by finishing second in his division. But nonetheless, for Stinker, we like Breeze. Definitely this week against Pittsburgh, as long as the weather holds out up there, should be a good passing opportunity for Breeze. DeMarco Murray against the Eagles. The Eagles are just sort of a middle-of-the-road defense. Of course, he's a cog in that Dallas offense, so we expect big things from DeMarco Murray again. And the Dolphin D should really shine. The Jets are going back to Geno Smith on Monday night. Just not sure how that offense is going to perform. I think the Dolphins D comes up with a couple turnovers and possibly a few sacks as well. On the downside, Stinker peaked earlier in the year, and he's starting to run into some injury problems, maybe some schedule difficulty issues. Marshawn Lynch is a little dinged up right now. His back's hurting him, so we don't expect as much production from Lynch as usual. He's also playing against a tough San Francisco front seven, so don't look for Marshawn to come through with big points this week. Mike Evans for the Bucks. Been on a tear lately, no doubt. But he does run into a tough Bengals secondary this week. Look for them to actually limit his production on Sunday. And then Sammy Watkins goes up against Cleveland, and he will probably draw Joe Hayden as the number one wide receiver in Buffalo. So I don't think Watkins is going to have a particularly big day for the Bills either. Going over to Star's side, he has the luxury of tinkering with his lineup a little bit this week before the playoffs start. He's going to go with Tannehill to start at quarterback. Over the last two games, he's scored 6 touchdowns. He's gone on record as saying he really feels like he's turned a corner in this offense, feeling very comfortable. He does have some weapons on the outside to throw to. It is an interesting offensive concept. So he's doing a good job of putting up steady production. Star's going to give him a shot to start in his lineup this week. Rashard Jennings is going to have a nice day against Jacksonville. Catches the ball out of the backfield, gets the majority of the carries. Jacksonville is tough at defending either one of those. They don't do a good job. So look for Jennings to have a good stat line this week. Dez Bryant always plays well against Philadelphia. It's a division rival for him. Dez has been playing great of late, played great across the pond against Jacksonville, played great last week against the Giants. So look for him to continue where he left off against Philadelphia this week. And then the Lions D, they get to take on what is quite possibly the most inept offense in the entire NFL in the Chicago Bears. Look for them to sack Cutler. Look for them to come up with a lot of ways to stuff that short area passing game. And it's going to be tough sledding for Chicago, so I like the Lions D this week. The two players that have carried Star up until now, Randall Cobb and Jamal Charles, both have some tough matchups this week, and I look for them to have mediocre stat production, if anything. But looking at the two sides, I think Star actually has a little bit more upside than Stinker, so I'm going with Star to win this game. We got Outlaw at Shark, again, just like the last game. Two teams that don't have a ton to play for. Outlaw has a very outside shot at winning the division title over there, and Shark's already wrapped up the number one seed, so really not much to play for him. But on Outlaw's side, we like LaShawn McCoy. been playing better as of late. Gets a Dallas defense that's susceptible. We saw what Rashard Jennings did to them in the screen game last week. Got some good yardage on the ground. Obviously, Sean McCoy is that same type of back, so we expect good things there. A.J. Green looks like he's past the turf toe issue, rounding back into form. Dalton's looking for him, and he draws that Bucs secondary that if you know what you're doing on offense, you can still exploit that Buccaneer defense, and I think A.J. Green will. I like the Texans D against Tennessee. J.J. Watt going up against a rookie quarterback spells disaster for Tennessee, so I like some pressure there, maybe some turnovers and sacks as well. The player I'm not too fond of for Outlaw is LeGarrette Blount. Obviously, if you're a running back in Bill Belichick's system, you never know how much playing time you're going to get. As long as Gray shows up for the meetings and doesn't oversleep and this and that, he should get back into the mix as far as touches goes. So I don't know if Blunt's going to get touches or if he's going to be on the sideline rolling one up. Nobody knows. Let's go over to Sharks side. Really, really stout lineup this week. And it starts off with the running backs because either Blue or Foster in the Texan backfield, and then Andre Ellington going for Arizona. Both of those series of backs will face off against the 31st and 32nd ranked run defenses in the NFL this week. So look for both of those backs to whichever one from Houston and then Andre Ellington. Look for both to really contribute to their team's success this week and run up some good numbers. The receivers are outstanding. He's always had Jordy Nelson, Demaryius Thomas throughout the year. Now you throw in Josh Gordon. Yes, Buffalo is a pretty tough defense, but Cleveland is obviously looking for Josh Gordon. They're drawing up plays for him. So that receiving core is very, very stout. If there's one chink in Shark this week and possibly going forward, it's still the quarterback position. Sanchez, you just never know what you're going to get. Last week he sort of rebounded, but that was against a less than stellar Tennessee defense. This week he's going to go up against Dallas. Dallas is playing well. That secondary is learning that cover two, and they might present some problems for him. But looking at both sides, I just think Sharks got too much in this matchup. I'm going with Shark to win over Outlaw. Mama at Kitty. Let's go ahead and start with Mama's side. I like Joique Bell this week. He hasn't been fantastic this year, but again, he's going up against Chicago. That defense can be had and definitely can be had in the running game. Jimmy Graham, as I've said in weeks previous, he's really back to being the Jimmy Graham everybody expected. So he's catching a lot of passes from Drew Brees, getting a lot of red zone targets. So that's obviously a good play. And then John Brown for the Cardinals going up against Atlanta. That secondary in Atlanta is horrible. And Brown seems to be the guy that they like to stretch the field with, so he might have an opportunity to get a couple deep shots in this game. For Mama, I love Crowell. I don't love him in this game. He's a great talent, but Buffalo is really tough against the run. They shut down the Jets last week, and that's really all the Jets can do is run the ball. So I don't know if Crowell's going to have the same success that he had last week against Atlanta. Don't blame him for putting him in his lineup, but just temper your expectations there. And then, unfortunately, Alshon Jeffrey, he's stuck in Chicago, and anybody that's stuck in Chicago isn't getting much production these days. And then for Kitty, she needs kind of a home run this week. She needs to win, of course, but she also needs to put up a big point total in order to potentially have a shot to make the playoffs. I like the fact that she's swinging for the fences, going with Andy Dalton against the Bucs. She could take the safe play and go with Matt Ryan, but she's got to swing for the fences, go for big production, and Dalton, I think, is the right pick. So I like him against the Bucs this week. Morris is going to have a big day against Indianapolis. They don't do well against the run. And then Antonio Brown, I think she's going to probably shuffle back into her lineup because he is her best player against New Orleans. And if I were to give her a piece of advice when she shuffles him in, I'd take Eric Decker out because he plays in a horrible offense, and he's just not going to score any points for her. On the downside for Kitty, it's the Packers D. But what are you going to do? I mean, she either starts the Packers D against the Patriots or the Patriots D against the Packers. She's making the right choice with inserting the Packers, but the way that Tom Brady's playing right now, I don't see them having a whole lot of success. Looking at both sides, Kitty's in a must-win, and she's doing all the things necessary to win this game. I like her to win over Mama. Scoresman at Ben. Scoresman, I love Stafford. Haven't loved him for the majority of the year, but he does have a great schedule going down the stretch. Obviously, it starts with Chicago on Thanksgiving Day. Bryant in Pittsburgh should have a nice day against New Orleans. That secondary can be had. We saw what Steve Smith and Torrey Smith did to them on Monday night. And then I like the Heron kid in Indianapolis. I think that he is going to assume that number one running back role with Bradshaw going down. Trent Richardson just can't take that role and run with it. So Heron should get the majority of the touches there against a Washington team that can be run on. On the downside, Ivory, with no passing game. We saw what Buffalo did last week. They key on the run, and you just don't get a whole lot of yardage there when people are putting 8 and 9 men in the box, daring them to throw. So, and then Steve Smith had a nice Monday night game, but it was a bad secondary in New Orleans. It's a better secondary in San Diego. Just temper your expectations for Steve Smith this week. For Ben, I really like Drew Stanton. Don't like him most weeks, but that Atlanta secondary is really, really bad. And if he's going to have a shot to put up points in any game, it's going to be this week. Love Le'Veon Bell this week against New Orleans. We saw what Justin Forsett did in that Monday night game with 180 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Le'Veon Bell is a better player, so I think that he's going to have some success there. You run down some of his other regulars. Gronk should have a nice day. I do like Denard Robinson against the Giants because they can be run against as well. And then Megatron playing Chicago. Not only is it Chicago, but it's also Thanksgiving Day, and Megatron has a history of playing well on Thanksgiving. For Ben, the only player I really don't like is Forte. Again, just a knock on that entire Chicago offense. And Detroit's front seven is extremely formidable. It's going to be tough to run the ball against that Detroit defense. So all that being said, I think Ben's got some better matchups, and I like Ben to win this game. Hooligan at Fuff is our game of the week, if you will. Hooligan's got a great lineup now. It's a shame earlier in the year he had some injuries and just some depth issues. His team, via drop ad, has really started to round into form lately with the addition of Hill. Odell Beckham has been a great addition. C.J. Anderson. He's really done a nice job of filling out that lineup. Manning's a great play this week. And then, you look at Hill against Tampa Bay. Should be able to run against them. I really like Trey Mason this week against Oakland. He seems to be running the ball more effectively, and Oakland can be run against as well. Odell Beckham is just an electric young talent. We see what he can do in space. We see what he can do catching the football. I think he's going to have a big week as well. And then C.J. Anderson, we saw what Latavius Murray did to Kansas City last week. C.J. Anderson draws them this week, much the same type of runner, kind of shifty, and should have some nice opportunities to score there. Shifting over to Fuff's side, obviously Rodgers should have a decent game. Watch out, though. Belichick has a scheme usually waiting for a good player like that. Forsett, again, should have a nice day against San Diego, maybe not as good as the Monday night game. And I also like Hilton just from a motivational standpoint. He just had a baby girl. His wife just had a baby girl last weekend, so he's probably fired up to go out and have another big day against Washington. I'm not crazy about Miller. The Jets' run D is actually their best quality on defense. And then, as we've talked about before, Brandon Marshall, the Chicago offense, just don't know what you're going to get there with Detroit. Hooligan's got a lot of great matchups, got a lot of great players in his lineup now, and I do like Hooligan to win this game over Fuff. Lastly, just want to run through, playoff potential. Shark, Stinker, Star, and Outlaw are all in. At this point, it's just a matter of some seeding things. They're open and available. But the last two teams that are pretty much in the driver's seat right now, even if they lose, are Fuff and Scoresman. But there's one interesting thing to keep an eye on. Hooligan is 44 points behind Scoresman for the last spot. If Scoresman loses and Hooligan wins, and they both end up at 6 and 7, say Hooligan goes out and scores 70, 75 points, and Scoresman scores 30. Hooligan could make it interesting in the total points race for the last playoff spot. So if you're looking for something to cling to, some little bit of game within the game or interest in this weekend's games, keep an eye on how many points Hooligan scores, and if Scoresman has a down offensive week, that's the only thing that could really close the gap and make that 6th playoff spot interesting. That's all I got, though. Thanks again to Mrs. Smith's Pumpkin Pies for sponsoring this segment. Everybody have a great week 13 and a happy Thanksgiving, and we will see you next week for the wild card round. Take care.